Okay, good morning and welcome everyone. Welcome, Kathleen. I'm so excited for today's installation of Higher Education Headspace with Baton Global and VictoryXR. My name is Mary Beth, and I'm really excited about the time we're going to spend today talking about augmented reality, virtual reality, technologies, and teaching and learning and beyond in higher education. And just a reminder, this whole series is about helping leaders like yourself in the higher education space kind of transition from the past academic year, from the summer flow that we were in, because summer is not a break. We all know that, but it is different, to help us transition back into kind of that headspace we need to be in as we go into a new academic year. And we think about, where are we taking our organizations strategically? And so we've heard some great things on people dynamics. We've heard about financial management. We've also talked about how we can use wonderful survey platforms to understand our university climate and culture. And today we're going to be taking a turn and talking about something that most of us might not be quite as familiar with, but we need to be. And so I'm going to let Kathleen tell us a little bit in just a second about VictoryXR and about herself and why it's so important to hear from her today. But as I introduce her, I just want to say, Baton Global had the fantastic opportunity to collaborate with VictoryXR on one of the largest research projects to date in the higher education and virtual reality space. Project started last year, wrapped up earlier this spring. We had some really insightful and promising results, just really showing that students so the learners and the instructors, so learners and teachers, are both really loving virtual reality implementation and finding a lot of value in it. But it was such a great process to collaborate with the team. And so we wanted to make sure they were a part of this series. Again, it's something that we may not have talked about as much over the past few months, but we want to make sure it's front of mind as you go into this year and you start to think about, how can I innovate with my institution? So Kathleen, you will do a much better job of telling us about VictoryXR and yourself. And then I have some questions for you, and I'm sure we'll have some questions from the audience. And I would just love to spend this time hearing today about how virtual reality, augmented reality can help drive our institutions kind of into their next evolution.
Okay. Well, Mary Beth, it's great to see you again. VictoryXR feels very grateful to Baton Global and to you especially for the wonderful research collaboration project that we did together last year. It was quite the undertaking, as you've mentioned. It encompassed quite a few institutions that we partner with, and we were blown away by the results. We didn't know what the results were going to be. And that was the whole purpose. That was the whole purpose. We kind of knew that we were onto something, but it's really great to have it justified. So, and verified, not only from educators, but from students as well. So I am Kathleen Willett. I am a mother of 6. I am a military veteran spouse. Pro-Navy. Woohoo. I'm a certified educator. My background is in deaf education and special education. I have some SLP, some audiology. I have a really, really strong training from my alma mater, my original alma mater, which is Texas Women's University. Got to do a shout out there for higher education. Love my alma mater. And I also, Regent University was my first master's, and I absolutely adored my experience in both institutions. So got to do a shout out there for higher education. And right now, all of that has led me to, after 30 years of teaching in some format, public, charter, private, state, and homeschooling, I have been led to leave the brick and mortar situation and move on to providing solutions for educational problems and for students and educators. And that is something that I've always wanted to do. I've always been a problem solver. I've always been a solution provider, not necessarily this is how you do things, but this is a way that you can do things. And this is how you would approach something. So as an educator, that's what we try to do. We try to teach them, where to look, but not necessarily what exactly to look at, because we want them to think for themselves and we want them to experience what it is that's around them. And I feel like virtual reality has met that need and my skill set beautifully to continue on with my teaching. And now I'm working with higher education institutions across the globe and teaching them how to implement virtual reality. I'm the director of customer success for VictoryXR, and I'm also the director of homeschooling. So I love my role. I love what we do because it's everything that I've ever been taught and known about brain-based learning all the way through, pre-K learning, through birth to 3 background, experiential learning, and now integrating that. And I've always been a project-based learner. And a project-based instructor. So those are the areas of my expertise. And I feel very privileged to work with the company that I work with now because we are so pro education for everybody. We look at all angles, all levels, and we create for educators to make their jobs easier and for students to make learning fun.
Yeah. So I see you have and you know what, I probably won't use the most up-to-date lingo, so it's an opportunity for you to educate me, but I see that you have a headset there with you.
I do.
And I'm not going to say, well, you must put it on and, model it for us. I mean, feel free. But just if you could, for the benefit of those who don't know VictoryXR very well, could you just tell us in a nutshell, what the company is and what you do? I mean, you've mentioned the education piece, the virtual reality piece, but let's bring it together and just give us the top line. Who's VictoryXR?
Top line. VictoryXR is an immersive educational software company. That's what we do. We build immersive experiences for educators and for students to dive into, to learn, to understand concepts more clearly and experientially. So rather than talking about things, the professor standing up on stage and giving a lecture, students having to listen or regurgitate information or write things down, now you bring them into a space. You're with them in that space. You're teaching them about that space while they're there with you. So if you want to go under the sea and talk about whales, bring in some whales, talk about their size, talk about their difference. And we go from age 10 all the way through adult with our software. And we produce CTE software as well. So career and technical education software. So you can become certified in drones, carpentry, welding, robotics, veterinary tech, health assistant, nursing assistant, and agriculture tech. So we offer quite a few different things that we build a lot. And we build a lot of really very cool experiences. World War II bunkers. So students can really get a better concept of what it was like to be in a bunker and what it was like to be in that setting and experience history. Edmund Pettus Bridge, walking across it with your students, hearing stories from those who lived that experience has bigger impact than just standing up, showing them a book, having them read about it, having them write about it, and telling them about it. It gives them a different opportunity to engage deeper with their learning.
Yeah. One of the things, being in education, it's interesting. It's almost like only now as I've gotten, 15 years into my career, right, that I seem to be taking all the things that I've learned about learning theory and actually reflect on myself and go, oh, wow, that's how I learn, right?
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of, I think it's kind of been put to rest, but, we used to back in the day, and it's kind of been, brought into question a bit, but there was this whole idea of learning styles, right? But I do know I still use that vernacular and people widely use it, even outside of the field of education. But one of the things that I have really been saying lately is like, I need to see things to understand them.
Yeah.
There's the kinesthetic piece. Like I need to write things down, for example, regardless of if I'm doing an online meeting, I always want to have a sheet of paper there with me. But I do find that, like you were saying, experience and actually being immersed in something, whether it is, instead of my mom telling me how to make fruitcake, she's like, come make a fruitcake with me. Right. Which actually my family has probably the only good fruitcake recipe in the world. But anywho, I like our fruitcake. But, she, instead of just telling me, and here's a note card, with your great grandma's recipe, it was fly down here and we're going to make these in November. So they're ready for December because that's how fruitcake works. But yeah. And I had to go and I had to get on a plane and go there to be with her. But from a teaching perspective, it sounds like, you're saying, okay, so you can have either these places or these experiences. I remember while we were doing the research, I got the opportunity to sit in with a class that was still, lecture based, but it was a dispersed class. These folks were taking a completely online course, but they had these, they had the headsets and they were joining a virtually physical space, right? And, it was interesting to actually see while they were doing some kind of individual work to see a student it was just so interesting because the professor was hanging out with his avatar there in the space, and a student actually walked over to the professor with his own avatar to ask a question versus just, pinging. It was just so interesting to see that. And it did make me feel more engaged than I have been, for example, when I've joined, maybe like a Zoom based lecture, right? In my own learning experience, it was really interesting. But then to hear some of these and to see some of these other experiences you're talking about as well, it's like, yes, you can recreate the classroom setting. You can also recreate other settings. You can also create things that simply aren't feasible, even in a physical setting. An example that comes to mind, the professor that I worked with was talking about actually making it possible using your technology to have students kind of shrink down. Think like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but on steroids. Right? To shrink down to be the size themselves of an atom so that they could see, a molecule and actually understand the 3D kind of positioning of everything and manipulate it. I mean, crazy stuff, right? So you can transport yourself, but you can also transform yourself, right? What would be probably one of the coolest applications that you've seen that you think would just really open up the possibilities for us in the audience?
Oh gosh, there's a lot. There's a lot. I would say one of the things that I think the proudest of that our company does is build things to prevent accidents from occurring in the workforce. So right now we have a forklift training. So it's, there's a lot of accidents that happen on forklifts because people aren't accurately trained. And so now you have to be, you have to really know what you're doing. I mean, think about driving a forklift in a huge warehouse and you nick the corner going a little too fast, but with a very powerful machine on the edge of one of these tall shelves that has lots of product on it.
I'm thinking Costco.
It knocks it down.
Yeah.
Then it's a domino. And you don't know who's standing in between all of these aisles. And you don't know like what happens to the forklift, who's there, where are the supervisors, where are the other workers in the warehouse. And it's something that you wouldn't think would be, that big of a deal. But there's a reason why, Home Depot, just when they've got when they have their pallet pushers, going down and out, they close things off. And they don't just close off the one aisle, they close off the aisles on both sides, to try to get to that product that's in the middle. Because just in case, they don't want don't want the customers to get harmed.
Yeah.
So being properly trained in those areas, I think is really important to not only, it is an educational aspect because you're learning something, but it's also helpful to society. And so I think that that's probably where I'm most proud of working in virtual reality is because we can build those things for different companies, different corporations, different institutions that want to help educate others in those fields without harming themselves at the time. You're sitting in a forklift and you're driving it around, but you're not actually in a warehouse and you're not actually going to hurt somebody if you run into something. So I really feel I'm most proud of things like that. We can contribute to not only just education, but also society in general and keeping everyone safe.
Yeah.
So one of the experiences that I think for myself, I used to be, and still am, but not as much, but I used to be just petrified of sharks. Absolutely. Like if I saw a fin and it was the skate, I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland. So I saw, a skate, it came out of the water and I like bolted from the front of a sailboat to the back of the sailboat because I was scared to death of fins. And I was like, oh my gosh, because we have skates in the Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah.
And rarely do we get a shark there. Sometimes we get dolphins. But oh my gosh, I, petrified. Growing up, just petrified. Going into virtual reality under the sea and bringing in a great white shark and having it there next to me. it literally took my breath away. We do try to scale all of our 3D objects to be relative to what they would be in real life. So whales are their actual size. So bringing in whales, you look at that and you're like, wow, like to my knowledge, I don't want to scuba dive. So I don't think I'm ever going to get that close to a whale in my personal experience. And I can say, oh yeah, whales are how often have you taught in school or talked to your students in school about, oh yeah, whales are as long as a 65 house or as big as my house and it's like, okay, I'm trying to envision this whale and and it's like, okay, you kind of get it, right? You have something to relate it to. But when you yourself can relate to something, it changes your understanding about it. And it changes your perspective on things too. So any experience, actually, every experience, I love our CTEs because it offers students the opportunity for their education part. They're watching 2D videos, but then they have the opportunity to go into headset and practice. They don't have to purchase all of the equipment. You don't have to purchase the helmet. You don't have to purchase the circular saw for welding. You don't have to purchase the $5,000 drone that you get to fly in VR and crash it 1,000 times. And replace it and fix it and all that. So VR just makes things so equitable too. Everybody has the exact same opportunity to use the exact same thing. So you go in and everybody has a VictoryXR account. If you have a labs license, you go into VXR Lab, then you've got that experience. You have those things available to you. You have those locations available. Like go to House of Commons, go to the Hall of Mirrors, go to the Senate, go to a courthouse. Think about lawyers and training and learning and legal systems. Think about the opportunity for students who are taking distance education classes to join their professor in a courtroom together. In their long distance education class, they could be in Kenya, they could be in Australia, they could be in Europe, but when you join a virtual reality, you're all together. You're in one location. So you are meeting your students, your distance education students for the first time. You're getting to understand them, you're getting to know them. And you're creating and developing relationships. And the other students are creating and developing relationships with one another. They're collaborating, they're cooperating, they're learning how to develop those 21st century skills, which are so important in jobs today, and flexibility and understanding one another and how to interact with others. And, we're coming out of this COVID era. So where those skills were kind of like, oh, how do we still and we're understanding, okay, those skills are really important. And these students may have missed out on that. So now we've got to ramp that up a little bit. So everything about virtual reality, I'm just proud of. So it's not one experience that I can really talk about and say, you've got to do this. But I will say that, for just about every single subject out there, and that's what I love about VXR as well, VictoryXR as well, because we're not single focused on one subject. There are a lot of virtual reality companies out there that are developing for healthcare, and they're very specific, and that is fantastic. They also cost quite a lot because they have to be so precise. They have to be so meticulous. We can build those things too, but it takes a lot to focus on just one subject area rather than let us do all subjects. So for your basic subject areas, not necessarily your basics, because you can definitely do basics in VR for sure, and students will understand them 1,000 times better. But I'm talking about if you have anatomy and physiology, if you have sociology class, if you have a history class, if you've got history of the world, if you have entrepreneurship, business, law, you name it, we have something for that. Or we offer something for you to do in those spaces, either with locations or with the 3D objects that we've built for you to use in those spaces. And we span the globe, and we are subject agnostic.
So I'm loving all of this, and I have so many questions swirling in my head that I want to ask you. I feel like I could sit and hear from you about this all day and never run out of questions or thoughts. But, as we're here with higher education leaders, right? You've touched on some really big topics in terms of higher ed leadership. I mean, we talk about institutions of higher education with that one term, and it's kind of painted with a broad stroke, makes it sound like a homogenous kind of group. And they're not. I mean, you have, every institution has its role to play and its role that it's chosen. So the workforce development piece is huge. I really love that you touched on that, because it's not something that I necessarily had thought about until you brought it up in terms of higher ed, and that, that's on me. But I love that piece. I love the flexibility that you're not focusing on one subject matter area or one kind of type of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So we're not just focused on process. We're not just, we're like procedural learning. We're focused on all kinds of learning, and we want to equip. One of the things that I've loved working with you guys is that it seems like a lot of your focus is on equipping educators, right? And so it's not necessarily just about, we want to focus on, I'm going to try to say this carefully. You obviously have a high focus on learning and content, but you're really wanting to equip the experts who are the educators in the classroom, or, that are doing a certification or whatever it may be, so that they can teach to the best of their capacity and ability, and in the ways that they feel are going to really hit home for their learners.
Yes.
And I really love that.
And that's one of my roles actually at the company, is the customer success aspect of it. Is that one of the things that people love about working with VictoryXR, and I say this 100%, is because I've been told this countless times, and I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, because I'm not.
Brag. Go ahead.
But I'm not that kind of person. But I am proud of our team. I'm proud of how well we support educators. I'm proud of how well we train our educators. We offer professional development with every license.
Okay.
We offer training once a week for anybody to come into. So our homeschool parents can come into it. Homeschool learners will be starting something soon for them to be able to come into. So, if they want to, a lot of parents don't want their students meeting other, strangers, which I get as a homeschooling mom myself, I get. But there's so much value to being able to just hop into a session once a week and then meet another professor from another institution who's going through the same thing you are, or maybe has already been there and is a little bit further along, but still has questions, and feel like, oh, it's okay. I'm not alone in this. It's all right. So I really feel I'm very proud of our team for being able to provide the education and the background that professors need to implement virtual reality, because that's the number one struggle and the number one question and challenge is, how do we implement this? Like, who's going to pay for the headsets? Do the students come to the school with headsets? We really do believe in our partnership with a lot of headset companies, but primarily Meta, but also Lenovo, also Vive, also Pico. We're friendly and we are headset agnostic as much as we possibly can be. But I will say that with our partnership with Meta, because Meta has really provided a huge support for education in VR, and they've worked closely with us to do that because they really see the value that this is offering. It's not just we're going to sell more. It really, truly is about changing for the good how students are learning, and changing how educators are using the tools that they're able to use to provide understanding concepts, details, relational situations to students. And that is through their immersive experience. And so, we're a software company. We need to work with hardware companies in order to make this happen.
Yeah.
And so that's really something that we work hard at. We work hard at the pedagogy, at teaching others the understanding, the history behind where we are, how this has come to be, the pedagogy of VR, and then how to use your headset, how to set it up, how to access the software, and then how to teach with it. So we will work with you on your syllabi and look things over and say, okay, what do you feel is is the greatest challenge for getting students to understand? You've been teaching this for 10 years. You've been teaching this for 15 years. What do you always feel your students don't walk away with not fully understanding or not fully grasping. And let's look at those. And that's where we're going to plunk VR into your syllabi. So it's not the other way around either. And that's something that's very, very important to understand for educators anywhere, is that you're not taking your entire curriculum and doing it in VR. Why would you? Why would you do that? And it's impossible to do that, actually. So what you want to do is you want to save those key, most valuable points within your syllabi, within your curriculum, and share those as experientially as possible. Help your students have access to all the same things in an equitable way, in sustainable way. So all go in and do a project base. Go in together, go in by yourself. Our product is asynchronous and synchronous, depending upon what you're working with. We also have simulations, which I'm really proud of because again, equitable. Students can go in and they can do a chromatography experiment. Everything is laid out for you. Actions, reactions happen. Drop a beaker, it falls to the ground, it breaks. You have to regenerate it. So, you're testing pH balance and things. Okay. The chemicals will change. It has an action reaction. Some things will blow up. Some things will, it's all there for you. Our chemistry professors, our biology professors love our simulations. And that's what we build. We build simulations and opportunities for students to learn. So I probably got off your question.
No, this is great. I mean,
it's sad about that. I'm sorry.
No, you're passionate about this, and there's a lot.
I am. I am passionate about it.
Well, good. And
it's genuine. It's not made up. I am who I am. You get me. We couldn't
ask for more. So great. Well, we've been focusing a good bit on the kind of learner and educator experience, right? And talking about, how can we help educators figure out, and I loved that term. I can't remember if she said that it was like the pedagogy of virtual reality or virtual reality pedagogy, but either whatever syntax you used there, really, really loved that. And it's true. And, so I remember when I took a phenomenology course, right? My phenomenology course, I was working on my doctorate. And one of the things that just blew my mind, right, was some of the greatest hermeneutics writers, and this was probably like Heidegger was talking about technology, right? But think about, when Heidegger is writing, and I'm probably misquoting here. I hope my professor never sees this because she'll be like, she didn't learn that. She needed some VR to help her learn it better. But talking about technology, and one of the examples that was given was talking about like eyeglasses, right? Which I think is great since we're talking about VR headsets too. We don't look at eyeglasses today and think of them as pieces of technology, right? But they used to be like cutting edge, right? And I still think about that every time I see these videos on like TikTok or Instagram where young children are being fit with corrective eye lenses for the first time. And you can see they're like, wow, that's my mom's face, and I can see it clearly. And it always makes me think about the fact that it's something that, as adults, we just take for granted that we can augment our own natural ability to see something, right? We would never expect a student to learn having that eyeglasses technology available without them if they needed it, right? We would never, you can't even drive. If you need corrective lenses, you can't drive without the correction, right?
I can't. I'm legally blind without my contact.
Really? Wow. I did not know that about you. So, so it's interesting. And so what you were talking about earlier, when we were talking about the technology and, VR may seem, depending on how familiar you are with that, how much you use it in your own life, may seem super like sexy and something that's almost not attainable. Or like, how would I even implement this? But think about, you would never expect your students in this day and age, whether you're teaching in K-12 or you're teaching adults, to really connect with images, the 2D images, if they were in color, right? Now, you might be showing them historic images in grainy black and white, but I can't watch TV if it's not HD anymore because it diminishes the experience for me because my expectations are what I've experienced. And one of the things I remember us learning through the research that we collaborated on is that the more experience a learner has with VR and gaming in general outside of the educational environment, one, the more satisfied they are with VR being a part of their learning experience, but also the more they crave it and the more they expect it.
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
we know that, I mean, I have an 11-year-old, he has a VR headset and he plays something called like Gorilla Tag. And he told me I'm not allowed to try it because I'll get motion sick. I don't think I would, but I can't read.
And I have ways that you can afford that too.
Awesome. Yeah. And I mean, that's not something we're heard in the research. Like people don't really tend to deal with that terribly much, right? But anywho, he is going to continue to grow with this expectation
Yes.
of media being presented to him, and whether that's entertainment media or learning media, he's going to grow to expect this more and more. And he's probably even going to be equipped with his own hardware.
Yes.
Right. And so just like we use color images to connect with our students, we're going to need to use virtual reality to connect with them and give them the experiences that they have come to expect and to connect with.
Yeah.
More of a statement than a question, but I would love to
know. But you raise a really good point in a segue too, for me, is that technology does advance. And so technology that is advancing today is the virtual reality, and headsets are becoming more advanced and more capable of holding more. They're more robust. So you can do more things. The headset of the old, which is, yes, it's been around for a while. Virtual reality's been around for a while. But for me, the headset of old would have been like, I don't know, like 10 years ago, even, 8 years ago, right? Or 6 years ago. There's a difference, because I think Meta really kind of helped to change things a lot when they came out with the Quest 2, which I have and I love. That sixed up the field. It was affordable, and that's what is key, is that it's something that most people can manage the cost of. And if, schools are renting out the headsets or whatever, they can either rent them, they can either assign them to the students, they can have it as an additional cost for their students to pay for through their school, or they just, someday everybody's going to be going to college with a computer, probably a headset and a VR headset, so you're going to have your buds, your iPods, whatever, and you're going to have your computer.
Yeah.
And you're going to have, like my daughter has a Sony, headset, and then your VR headset. And those will be the learning tools that students will just, need for college. They'll need that and their bedding and a refrigerator and, bye.
Yeah.
There's that. And I say the segue too, is because something that's super, super important that I really want to talk about is the technology of today is not only the VR technology, but now it's incorporating the AI. Everybody's talking about AI. Everybody's talking about how can I use this ChatGPT? ChatGPT can write a paper for you. So that's why it's so important for students to be able to go into VR and record themselves performing a project, creating something, and then sending that video to a professor.
Oh, yeah.
And
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, you can record a video on your phone of yourself doing something, but how many students are going to be able to afford all the materials they need to build those projects? So now you've got the opportunity for students to build projects either synchronously together, bringing students together from anywhere in the world, or asynchronously on their own, and performing things too on their own, and performing different, like we work with a fantastic school that does sociology, doing amazing things in the sociology department. And honestly, if you're interested in sociology, talk to Indiana Wesleyan. That's all I'm going to say. Got to do some shout out. But I will say the incorporation of AI is what's making the big difference. And that is one of the things that we're doing too, is offering those AI, but we're offering AI avatars. So now you can go in as an educator, because you've taught. So as an educator, how often have you gotten texts in the middle of the night saying, I don't understand this topic. I didn't quite get this. Could you reiterate that? Blah, blah, blah. I didn't understand this in the book. Like, it happens a lot, right? These AI educators that you can go in, literally will go in, log into your VictoryXR account, and you can click on AI creation tool. It's a DIY creation tool. And you select your lesson, you type in your lesson, you type in your subject, you type in your grades, and then you start typing in, feeding in, cut, paste, I don't care, information that you know. that you want your students to know. Maybe it's a lecture that you're giving. Maybe it's a lesson on something. Maybe it's something that you've written that you want your students to be aware of. And so you put it out there. You can break it up and you can put in images. You can put in little videos, clips. You can put in question and answers. So you can do a true false. Every once in a while, throughout the lecture, you do a true false. You do a full multiple choice at the end. So that you know that students are, really understanding concepts. And then you can say, okay, I want you to do this lesson. I want you to go through it. Or I want you to listen to this lecture. Or here was my lecture on Tuesday that you all missed. Because you couldn't make it because you were away at the football game or, you had your soccer match. Okay. But here was the lecture. I'm going to present it to you this way with this AI avatar, knowing everything that I know to share with you. Then that AI avatar is going to pull from ChatGPT as well. However, you're going to set parameters on how much information ChatGPT can give it versus how much information the students can rely on just based on your lecture. The students can go into that lecture and they can click a button and that raises a hand and says, oh, you have a question. The avatar asks it, oh, you have a question. You type in your question or you click the button and you voice your question. If you're voicing your question in a foreign language, because let's say you're a student who doesn't quite understand, like you, I know your background. So let's say that you're learning 2 different languages at the exact same time.
Sounds right.
And you're not as familiar with one as you are with your native language. You speak to it in your native language. That avatar is going to respond to you in your native language, but based on the information that your professor gave in their language.
Now I want this. I want to do this. I want to see that student.
And it's free. That's the crazy thing is we offer it for free. You can go in and you can create as many lessons as you want to. We are reviewing them for clarity and accuracy and to make sure that nothing's questionable information being presented or malicious. But for the most part, we haven't gotten any of that. So we really have gotten just very, sincere lessons that have been produced by all kinds of educators across the globe that are just, feeding information. So someday students using our product will be able to go into and use this library of lessons available on various topics. If the professor has made it public, if the professor wants it to be private and remain within their own institution, their own organization, that's fine. You can do that. But you can also share it to the public. And it's really going to boost academics so much to have those different resources available to students to learn with and from. And then they can go in and they can say, oh, well, the professor talked about bringing this and this and this into VR. I can do that. So then you go into, you select the simulation or you select the creator space you want to go into. You bring in those 3D objects, what we call spawnables. You bring those in and then you can manipulate them. You can climb up the wall. You can jump off the building. You can, you can have zero gravity. Because our product has built all of these crazy, wonderful, amazing tools for students to experience their learning. And so that's where technology is going. It's going at the intersection of other technologies. And it marries well with what is happening at higher education institutions right now, which is the cross-curricular approach. Because a lot of institutions are seeing that when you are studying marketing, you're studying marketing, blah, blah, blah. You got to, you just lecture, repeat, do something, lecture, repeat, do something. Okay, create this, create that, create this. That's not what modern day and futuristic marketing is going to be all about. It's going to be about knowing about different subject areas and really being very highly skilled at different marketing techniques.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So you've got social media, social media marketing is in and of itself its own field. So merging all of those together, crossing different curriculum. If you're studying poli-sci, do you want to study just poli-sci? Or do you want to study, other things? Do you want to study history along with poli-sci so that you understand, And do you have to have a degree in history and poli-sci to understand? No, but we're going to introduce some more history with poli-sci, with some marketing, with some, social sociology, so that you really get an understanding of your clients, their situation, their setting, problems they're presenting to you, and how to promote yourself in your own business.
Love it.
A lot of institutions are seeing the need for crossing over their curriculum. Now you're also crossing over technologies because you're having AR, you're having VR, you're having XR, which is experiential reality, which is a crossover of both, and AR and MR, and then an MR and mixed reality, like the whole gamut, and now AI incorporated with. Very exciting to be a part of. And if you're not a part of it, you really need to investigate it now, because it's happening so fast and developing so quickly that it's important to know about because of where it's going.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you just live in this fascinating world. And I hate the fact that we have to time box this conversation.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
No. And I think, again, we've talked a lot about the teaching and learning piece, right?
Yes.
And I really, really love that. And I know you and I have had conversations around how, institutions, they exist to do the teaching and learning piece, right? But there's a lot that goes into running an institution of higher education well and engaging all kinds of people. And we don't have time for it today, but I did just want to mention, you have said to me before that there's also opportunities to leverage virtual reality for alumni engagement, for fundraising, for, campus tours, admissions, all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Dormitory. Campus tours, especially.
Right.
We do digital twins of dorms. Students can come in and they can, if you live in California and you want to see, a dorm on the East Coast, but can't afford to get there.
Yeah.
Then you want to see a campus. So you go into a digital twin of a campus. You go into a digital twin of a dorm. And you'll be able to explore a little bit of the campus. You're going to miss out on that student engagement aspect of it, obviously. But you're still going to get your tour, and you're still going to have, and then a lot of those tours also have AI avatars in them.
Okay.
So you can go in and you can ask it questions about college. So you can ask this AI avatar in various places set on campuses, history of the college, how many students do you have, how many undergraduates, what's their success rate, how do you help them in jobs, in the future, how many are placed within the first year in their field that they work, that they study in. Those kinds of questions that students have, that parents definitely have for their students when they're going to college.
That's amazing. Well, I think one of the kind of points that I want to make with that too is just, there is definitely the piece about, I teach something, there are sticky areas for my students that I think could benefit from virtual pedagogies, right? Virtual reality pedagogies. And so I, as a educator, would like to implement them. And I actually always, every time we talk, I'm always thinking about that. As I teach phonetics, or as I teach language, or as I actually teach pedagogy itself, right? How could I do that? I've seen some great examples working with you all. But also, so putting on kind of the administration and leadership hat, we've heard about some ways it can be, implemented as well. And we've talked about this idea of having, working towards, right? Even if you start with teaching and learning, or you say, we're actually going to start from the marketing perspective or the admissions perspective when it comes to integrating virtual reality into our institution. There are lots of different entry points, if you will, that VictoryXR can help with, and then work towards, and what is our institution, how does VR fit into our institution's technological strategy or a pedagogical strategy, but how does it fit holistically? And, I do think that was one of the things in talking with educators and leaders as we did our research, it became apparent as we did some of these interviews of hearing from the educators, right? So the professors, they were very concerned with how can this impact learning for my students, right? A lot of folks working kind of on the staff side or in the leadership side were saying, how can this impact the university, right? From a dollars perspective, not just dollars being spent, but dollars being brought in, dollars being saved, but then also the impressions that we're able to make or the connections that we're able to empower. But they really were starting to think and realize, not even think about it, but also just recognize that there has to be a place for this. Just like we've had to, start using TikTok, right? For our social strategies or for our engagement strategies. We've had to figure out how, we've had to move from computer labs to understanding that everybody's coming with their own laptop, and some students may not be, but from an equity perspective, we need to make sure that happens. And, all these different things. VR has to start to, you can't leave it until later. You need to start looking at it. I think, for all the reasons you've run us through today, VictoryXR is a fantastic place if you haven't already started that journey or you haven't started it kind of in concert, right, to do that. So my parting question for you would be, let's think from the leadership side, right? If I am a leader, whether that's a dean of a large school or, a provost or a president at a university, if I'm saying, I don't want to be sitting on this 8 ball and I definitely don't want to be behind it, right? What are my first steps? What do I need to do? How do I connect with VictoryXR specifically, but also just in general? What do I need to do to start this journey?
Email us. You can email us at info@VictoryXR. You can email me at Kathleen at VictoryXR. Pretty simple. If you're higher education, definitely email John at VictoryXR.com, all of it. And just ask. It's okay to ask questions. We tell our students, we want you to ask questions. Don't just sit there. But when it comes to being the educator, you feel like, but if I ask a question, that shows my ignorance. Well, it doesn't show your ignorance. It shows your willingness to learn. And that's really what we want to push for our higher education partners, for those out there that are curious. I often in the past, and I still today, call myself a curiosity builder because I want people to want to know more. So I give them as much information as I can, but I want them to be the ones that then take it and run. So just reach out and learn more because there's so many ways. VictoryXR provides solutions to problems that you may not even know we can help you with. And all of those things that you just mentioned, admissions, very challenging in today's day and age. Although I understand that things are getting a little bit better, across the globe, but some institutions are actually closing because they don't have the students that they need anymore. They can't help with the cost of running a brick and mortar institution. So there are a few that are closing down and we hate to see that happen, but the larger schools are absorbing them. And then maybe some other smaller schools are absorbing them. It comes down to how you want to implement. And then if you reach out with those questions about, hey, I'm really curious. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know a thing about this. I don't know what I'm doing. We will reach back out to you. We give you a tour and we talk to you about some solutions. And we ask you, what are your main? We want to speak to you. We want to speak to your situation and answer your questions because everyone is different. And there are a lot that are the same, but everybody has their own individual questions and they want them answered. They just need solutions. They need solutions to problems. And that's what we're here to do.
That's wonderful. Well, Kathleen, you have given us a fantastic, not just overview of everything that VictoryXR and VR has to offer for higher education, but also you've given us some great examples. I think sometimes it's hard when we're confronted with something new to really visualize or to think like, how can I apply this? Or what could this actually mean for my context? And so I appreciate the fact that you have given us these examples. You've told us, if you want to be your own example, right, here's how you can get started with us. So thank you for this introduction into this brave new world. And I look forward to having more conversations in the coming months and years. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who was able to join us today. I hope we covered most of your questions, and we look forward to seeing what you do with virtual reality in your own classrooms and institutions. Take care.